Okay, so Sir Christopher Wren, 1632, 1723. So he had, a rather long life and very, very successful as an architect. Although he was not an architect, he never trained as an architect. He was a scientist. But at that time, there were more less rigid people about giving qualifications to possible architects. So Sir Christopher Wren was born on the 30th of October, but he died. Wait a minute, I'm a little bit confused. I think this is wrong. No, you see, in the old system, it was the 20th of October. So because there were two systems of counting time, and it's using the old system of the calendar. He was born today. Was one of the most highly acclaimed English architects in history, as well as an anatomist, astronomer, geometer, and mathematician, physicist. Sorry, not physician, physicist. He was accorded responsibility for rebuilding 52 churches in the city of London when after the Great Fire in 1666, including what is regarded as his masterpiece, St. Paul's Cathedral on Ludgate Hill, completed in 1710. The principal creative responsibility for a number of the churches is now more commonly attributed to others in his office, especially Nicholas Housemoor. Other notable buildings by Wren include the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, Royal Naval College, Greenwich, and the south front of Hampton Court Palace. The Wren building, the main building of the College of William and Mary, Virginia, is attributed to Wren. Okay, so educated in Latin and Aristotelian physics at the University of Oxford, Wren was a founder of the Royal Society and president from 1680 to 1682, and his scientific work was highly regarded by Isaac Newton and Blaise Pascal. Not a little thing. But how do we explain it that a man who was not trained as an architect arrived at building so many buildings and arrived at the stature of being, by many considered the most important British architect? I think the methods employed today are very rigid, with getting the right for signature from a certain committee, when there are, I'm sure, very talented artists who could build very interesting buildings, but they don't have the right to build. But at that time, it wasn't like this. Anyway, this was the man. Not too many architects today look like him, but a different time. What can we say? Now we have a pair of ripped jeans and a t-shirt, something which would have been totally inconceivable at that time. I mean, look, he's very elegant, with a velvet, nice coat and, incredible wig. Anyway, I guess each time has its virtues and its problems. This is a bust of him, being so famous. Of course, there were sculptors who were happy to carve his portrait. Now, the Sheldonian Theatre in Oxford, at Oxford University, his architecture might not be very appealing today because it's rather, predictable and so on. But when you think that, again, this is not one of the 52 churches he built or rebuilt. This is a secular building. He built many, and I would say they stand the test of time. This is more than 300 years old, and built well by a scientist who loved architecture, Sir Christopher Wren. I mean, just this interior, if one architect would do in a lifetime, and that architect would feel accomplished. Just this interior. But, you know, he built so many buildings. And, you know, look at the ceiling. You know, in its secular way, I think it's beautiful. And again, you know, we don't think of in these terms. We don't think of ornament. We don't think of, you know, things to bring sensitivity to the buildings. We only think of structure and space, structure and space. We'd never look upwards to ask ourselves, well, what are we going to do with the ceiling? You know, the ceiling, and above the ceiling is the roof, and above the roof is the above, meaning the sky or heavens, if you are inclined, you know, to dramatize at least a little bit in a, you know, religious or mystical way. We don't think of such matters. We don't lift our eyes to the ceiling and to make a reflective ceiling plan, as it is called. No, but the ceiling is very important. And you can see here that it is important and is treated accordingly. This is the ceiling. Would we do something like this today? Of course not. Why not? Because we are busy to run on the highway. The more, the better. The quicker, the better. But where are we running? From and towards. Anyway, I think, you know, we better reflect on these things, because instead of consuming a lot of gas to run on the highway, we could perhaps spend our energies embellishing a beautiful ceiling, just like Sir Christopher Wren did. Well, he didn't paint himself the ceiling, but this is an interior space that he created. And, you know, the architect can do the same by employing the services of artists. The Tom Tower at Christ Church in Oxford, at Oxford University. I mean, again, if this man did just the room we just saw, and he would have concluded at the end of his life that he didn't, you know, cheat on life, that he didn't spend frivolously his life. Well, he did. Besides that and many other buildings, he also built, already built 52 churches, including the notorious St. Paul Cathedral. Anyway, and besides this, you know, he had other functions, you know, anatomist, physicist, and so on, being praised by Blaise Pascal and Isaac Newton. Not a little thing. It's also true he didn't watch too much TV because he didn't have one. He didn't watch all those beautiful crime, you know, films on HBO. Those immensely appealing and magnificent rapings and shootings that our blessed TVs are full of. When are we going to get rid of the TVs? Instead of being a beautiful medium for promoting culture and you know, ideas and so on, it fell in the hands of merchants who know that the scandals sells and that's the result. Now, St. Paul Cathedral, London. Look at this in all its majesty. And Jean Nouvel built a building, super mall, right across the street from St. Paul. I don't see it here on this picture, but hopefully we are going to see it in some other picture. I mentioned Jean Nouvel because he connected conceptually and visually with St. Paul. And I should have included his project here. I don't think I did. Anyway, this is the most imposant building still in London because of its function. You know, it's a cathedral, but also because of its dimensions and its symbolism, and its, you know, it's a central force in the urban fabric of London. Built by Sir Christopher Wren. I remember once, I think I even wrote a text for a competition because I read that some homeless people were banished being in the proximity of the cathedral. And I think that is wrong. It doesn't matter how splendid the building might be, but I think especially a church or a cathedral or people connected with them should allow the so-called homeless to be in the proximity of the building. The elitism of the church should not be easily acceptable at all. Anyway, it's a vast building. It's look at this, and yeah, you can tell it stands out. St. Paul Cathedral, Sir Christopher Wren, London. Great views. And of course, his architecture was very rigorous because he was a scientist. So I admire such cultural figures. Here you have a physicist becoming an architect without actually turning his back on physicism or on physics, and still building brilliantly. I think this is a bridge by Sir Norman Foster, if I'm not mistaken, leading towards, but you cannot escape, being oriented continuously towards St. Paul Cathedral. Look at the ceiling. I mean, just the ceiling in itself is a lifetime work. Now, this view is actually from the building by Jean Nouvel. This is a mall, and he cut into the building exactly in the axis. It's an intentional honoring of St. Paul Cathedral. I don't know if I have here the plan of the building by Jean Nouvel, but this part of the building belongs to the building by Jean Nouvel. And this one you see even better. Intentionally he cut into the mall to allow the presence of St. Paul Cathedral to be pregnant, to be obvious, to be honored. Jean Nouvel is not a non-contextualist. In his subtle ways, sometimes more subtle than others, he is a contextualist, if not physically, but then metaphysically. So again, Sir Christopher Wren, St. Paul Cathedral. Now, Temple Bar Gate in London is a gate. We don't have gates any longer. I mean, very rarely a city decides to build a gate. Why? Because we are busy running. The relevance of such gates is diminished, if not totally demolished, if you are in a car and if you have the mentality of a driver of a car. Things changed, because of the speed. In a way, speed ruined the city. And there are people who think so, and Kenneth Frampton is one of them. Where are we running so much? I mean, where are we going, really? I remember last summer when the restrictions because of the pandemic were, brought down. It was an assault on the streets of Bucharest. Like people just couldn't stay home. They had to run, And running, you know what it means, using most of the time gas. And when the gas ends, we start the war in Iraq. So welcome to consumerism. Library, Trinity College, Cambridge University. What names here? Trinity College, Cambridge University. Some of the best. And the building is good too, I would say. Yes, Christopher Wren knew what he was doing. It is, I mean, you might not like necessarily, you know, this kind of architecture, should we call it rather neoclassical, but it has dignity, it has presence, it has force. And yes, it's probably a pleasure to pick up a book from these shelves. There was a belief in irregularity. You see, even the pattern on the floor is not the neurotical pattern of the rugs in the Seattle library by Rem Koolhaas. No, this was a time which valued stability and order, and yeah, a different time and a different architecture, different building. Trinity College, Oxford University, Sir Christopher Wren. Marlborough House, Westminster. This is just a drawing, and this is the building. I wonder what attracted Christopher Wren towards architecture. Why wasn't he happy being a physicist where he accomplished a lot? Well, maybe it's that need for matter, you know, to move away from theory to what is called practicality or practice. I guess some thinkers, I mean, coming from the side of thinking, they need the concreteness of architecture, handling matter, organizing matter in a willful way, in a designed way. Of course, not all physicists do this, but someone like him did so. And this is perhaps a quest for totality, a quest for synthesis. You are accomplished theoretically, but you want to also assume the other side of culture or life even. Goethe did the same thing. You know, Goethe was not a scientist, but he wrote the theory of colors. He even entered into politics into polemics with Sir Isaac Newton. Goethe reproached Newton that he was making the same mistake, dividing light in 7, as the church was making the mistake of dividing God in 3 or 4. Anyway, these are, I think, such human examples like Goethe, like Sir Christopher Wren, like Isaac Newton, like Blaise Pascal. They stir up our imagination because they transcended the enclosure of a unique, specific domain of activity. So it was a quest for wholeness, you know, trying to honor the richness of life and art and culture and science with various preoccupations. Hampton Court Palace, East Front. Look at the sky. Now, I am asking myself, what student of architecture or architect today would represent something like this in the sky, in the project. Um, of course not, because we have now planes and zeppelins, and well, maybe not so many zeppelins, but drones, right? We have drones, so you know maybe Swedenborg was right when he said the more angels in the sky, the more space. But we have no angel now in our skies at all. They all vanish. They all disappear. We have planes, yes. We have higher up satellites. We have drones, but no angels. Anyway, you see the ornament is not only on the building, but also in the garden. You would wonder, why did they do this? Why were they not minimalists? Well, because as you can see here, two human beings, no cars are waiting for them. They have nowhere to run. So having nowhere to run, they had to take care of the land, of the garden, and of the facade of the building. Uh, you know, different kind of life and a different kind of architecture. Royal Hospital, Chelsea, the chapel. Look at this, again, gloriously painted at the top. Do we do something like this today? Of course not. I mean, maybe in some religious buildings we still do it, maybe, but this is not a secular building, it's a chapel. But I still think this treatment of the ceiling, of the above of the room, represents the longing of the human beings walking here or sitting here towards the above. And that kind of longing we don't have these days. Not always. There are exceptions, like in the artwork by Maya Lin at the Penn Station in New York City. And other examples, of course. There are, I'm not saying that there are no glorious ceilings, even in the Morpheus Hotel by Zaha Hadid. And by the way, a few days from now, it will be her birthday. So we'll pay homage to her because she deserves it. Those who think she doesn't deserve it don't know what they are talking about. Anyway, a different time here. Of course, you see these ceremonies. Anyway, Royal Hospital, Chelsea, the dining hall. So we saw the chapel, now we see the dining hall, equally glorious, but being that it's a dining hall and not a chapel, is different. It's not too curved at the top. But I mean, the chandeliers have some curves, but the room itself, but still is a room with glory, you can tell, and money, of course. And the people meeting here were aware and are aware of the of the riches and the splendors of this environment. It's a communal space, but it's a communal space which is not simplistically resuming itself to just feeding people on their plates. There are plates, of course, but there is also architecture. There is also, the ceremonial aspects relating to, certain functions here, as you can see. Anyway, a rich society, a rich time, and the architecture reflects this. Who would do a dining room like this today? Greenwich Hospital, North Front. I mean, it's amazing how much Sir Christopher Wren built. Really, even by today's standards. I mean, this man, and I didn't even show, except St. Paul, I didn't show the other 51 churches he built just in London. I don't know how he did it. Anyway, this is a hospital, which looks a little bit, has, you could almost say, at least some in the corners, that it's a church. It's not a church, but maybe connecting a church with a hospital is not a bad idea. I think it should be done for the benefit of both the hospital and the church. Unfortunately, the hospitals of today, they are big machineries, and big businesses, of course, and it's an industry. Greenwich Hospital, the painted hall. Look at this. Let's read again, because I'm not sure I read correctly. A hospital? Look at this. Again, is it a hospital? Yes, Greenwich Hospital. How could this be? I mean, why is it we don't do such things any longer? Because we are in a hurry. Look at this. This is part of a hospital. Can you believe it? But I almost feel like saying, if you are sick, you might get a little better just walking through, with difficulties because you are sick, through this room. We removed contemplation even from a hospital, or especially from a hospital. But maybe if we bring back the contemplation, the function of contemplation to our lives, maybe something will be gained, and I think it will. But we are so afraid of contemplation because the capitalist will say, wake up, stop contemplating, come here and produce and produce again. Stop contemplating, you dreamer, because you'll get fired. No time to to do such a silly in today's consumerist environment. Anyway, so I repeat, this is a hospital. Now, this cannot be true. I mean, really, if you compare this with the hospitals that we know, now it's true, maybe just an elite had the chance to be, treated in such a hospital. It's possible. Anyway, Greenwich Hospital, the dome, the painted hall. Look at this. The physicist Sir Christopher Wren was, I think, a remarkable architect. And it's enough just to look here to understand this. What are these little embroideries here? Why did he need them? Well, to bring sensitivity to the building, to the interior. He was not happy just with structure and space. He also needed these, I call them architectural embroideries. Something we don't do. Again, why don't we do it? Well, because we are in a hurry. That's why. And again, you see the relationship with the above. Something we neglect completely. We just make a, hopefully a terrace jardin above the roof, just a flat roof, a flat slab, and that's it. St. Bride's Fleet Street, the spire, and the spire it is. No one would contest it. Yes, quite a spire. In drawings and in so-called reality. I said so-called because I think a drawing, especially a good drawing, is a real thing as well. Usually we say, this is a drawing, but you should see it in reality. The drawing has reality too. Levius Woods wrote about the reality of the ideal. I think it's a nice way to put it, the reality of the ideal. Are we thinking enough about this? The reality of the ideal? usually we think that the ideal is not real. No, the ideal, if it's serious and profoundly meant and felt, thought, is real. Saint Mary le Beau, steeple, the steeple. Saint Christopher Wren, how did he do all these works? Besides also being a brilliant physicist and other things, anatomist, and I forgot all the things that he did. And the buildings still stand, more than 300 years old. St. Mary's Le Beau interior. St. Stephen's Walbrook. As I said, as we read, he built and rebuilt 52 churches just in London. Amazing. But there were other British architects a little later who also built a lot of churches, like Pugin. He built, and he died at 40, and he built actually about 40 churches himself. I mean, not with his hands, with his projects. So we are still in London with Sir Christopher Wren. He was born using the old system of the calendar today on the 20th of October. Some think he was the greatest and is the greatest British architect until now. I'm sure Sir Norman Foster and others would contest that, because yes, Great Britain has had other important architects. Just in the 19th century, they had a good number of very important architects, and in the 20th century as well. But still, Sir Christopher Wren stands out. Maybe because he was not an architect also. Winslow Hall, Buckinghamshire, with brilliant, imposing chimneys, maybe too imposing, but no, they add something to the building. Otherwise, the building wouldn't be so interesting. Emmanuel College, Cambridge University, the chapel. Another chapel at Cambridge. The religious function of human life was always important. And architecture found, an auspicious client in the church, always. library, another library, Lincoln Cathedral. This one makes me think a little bit of certain buildings of the Renaissance in Italy, thinking even of Ospedale degli Innocenti by Brunelleschi. Books, books, books. Did they kill the cathedral? As Victor Hugo said, probably. But now the book itself is being challenged, if not killed, by the new media, the digital assault on the books, although the books are still brilliantly singing, so to speak, but maybe it's just a sunset effect, because how useful are they still, you know? Yes, a lot of books are being published, but let's also think of this. A book is nourished, at least in part, by a fallen tree. The paper is made by cutting down trees. So, you know, maybe it's time to abstain a little bit from so much publishing, especially when so much publishing is so vicious. It's not about culture, it's about the scandal of information. And it's another industry which fell in corrupted hands. I found myself a great theological library thrown to the garbage in New York City. Hundreds of books, and because I love books, I tried to save them, and I took home maybe more than 100. You know, they were very old books, even 300 years old books. They were flooded in the basement of an institution which was supposed to repair them, and then they were discarded. One book even had wooden covers. Very interesting books, but they were dying under my eyes. I couldn't save them, but I took a lot of photographs of them. Anyway, the library, now the library, which was always, you know, at the center of knowledge, how relevant are really today the libraries? Because today we have access to a lot of information, at least information on the web. It's not the same thing, of course, to read a book or to read anything on the web, but the luxury of staying home and with a click to access even, you know, important books is remarkable. Anyway, his own house. We are approaching the end of this presentation on Sir Christopher Wren. Is this whitish one, but there are people who think that it might not be his house. It's a controversial subject anyway, but it might have been or not. It's not really so important. It's the same with the house of Andrea Palladio in Vicenza. You know, there is information that that's the house where he lived. Other people think that he didn't live there. Anyway, crypt of St. Paul's Cathedral, Wren's memorial on the left. Now, this is a challenging point of the presentation for all architects in the world. Let's imagine that, you know, an architect is so worthy of being, you know, respected and commemorated and immortalized in a way by being placed, you know, after death in a crypt in a cathedral. But what architects today would have that, you know, audacious, you know, longing, so to speak? Not many. Anyway, but also the churches and the cathedrals of the present are rather unconvincing in general, not always, but in their function, in their so-called sacred function. That's why, especially in England, where I read that at least 2 churches a year are desacralized every year.